At our wedding, he
I
left me for
understand
his
that, but I can't
ex's
wait until
call.
Monday.
I married a
We need to
Mafia
handle this
boss,
now
and
before
he
the press
begged for
finds
me
out.
back. Isabella stood at the entrance, her heart pounding, her hands clutching the lace of her wedding gown. Every detail of the day had been perfect, or so she had believed. The air smelled faintly of roses and incense, but beneath it lingered a tension that only she seemed to notice. Her fiancé, Alexander, waited at the altar. His tailored suit was flawless, his hair neatly combed and his smile polite, but distant. Isabella's chest tightened as she walked down the aisle. She had dreamed of this moment since she was a child, imagining the soft music, the warm lights, and the gentle promises whispered in the presence of witnesses. As she approached, Alexander's eyes met hers for only a fleeting second before drifting down to a device in his hand. A phone buzzed quietly and he glanced at it, a shadow crossing his face. Isabella's steps faltered ever so slightly. Something was wrong. Her heart whispered warnings she refused to hear. The priest began the ceremony, reciting words of love and devotion. Isabella's voice shook as she repeated the vows, feeling a strange chill creep along her spine. Alexander nodded politely, muttering his lines with a mechanical precision that made her pulse race, not with joy but with unease. Then the phone buzzed again. This time, the ringtone cut through the soft hum of the cathedral like a blade. Alexander hesitated. He checked the screen, his expression tightening, and Isabella's worst fears were confirmed before words could even form. "It's her," Alexander whispered under his breath, a trace of panic in his voice. Isabella froze. Her mind raced, trying to understand, trying to convince herself that she had misread the moment, that perhaps it was some small error, some trivial interruption. But deep down, she already knew. Before she could reach him, before she could even demand an explanation, Alexander's hands shook. He whispered a hurried apology and, in an act that shattered everything, turned away from her. He walked out of the cathedral, phone pressed against his ear, leaving Isabella standing at the altar, frozen in disbelief. Gasps filled the cathedral. Some guests murmured, others whispered. Isabella's cheeks burned with humiliation, but beneath the anger, a raw, aching pain spread through her chest. She had been abandoned at the moment she had expected to be cherished most. Tears threatened to fall, but Isabella clenched her fists. She would not allow this moment to destroy her entirely. Not here, not now. She took a deep breath, steadying herself, and turned to leave the cathedral before her emotions could betray her further. Outside, the cold air hit her face. The world seemed sharper, harsher, every shadow a reminder of betrayal. Her phone buzzed. It was a message from Alexander. "Isabella, please, let me explain. I made a mistake. Meet me." Her fingers trembled as she stared at the words. Every instinct screamed to ignore it, to walk away and never look back. Yet something deeper, a mix of heartbreak and disbelief, made her consider his plea. It was then that she felt another presence, one that made the hair on her arms rise. A figure emerged from the shadows of a nearby alley, tall, confident, and undeniably commanding. He wore a black coat that fell to his knees, his eyes dark and unreadable, yet they seemed to pierce through her. "Are you all right, Miss Isabella?" the man asked, his voice smooth, deliberate, almost musical. Isabella took a step back, instinctively defensive. Who are you?" "I am Lorenzo," he said, his eyes scanning her as if assessing both her strength and her vulnerability. "I saw what happened inside. You should not be left alone after such betrayal." What are you?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly despite her efforts to stay composed. "I am someone who understands power and danger," he said calmly. "And I know when a person is being discarded unfairly." Isabella studied him, a mixture of wariness and curiosity in her gaze. He was dangerous, yes, but there was something magnetic about him, a subtle energy that drew her attention even in her heartbreak. "I don't need anyone," she said, her voice firm, trying to shield the raw wound beneath her pride. "I can handle this on my own." Lorenzo smiled faintly. "Perhaps, But sometimes strength alone is not enough. Sometimes survival requires alliances and allies. For a moment, Isabella was silent. The wind whipped her hair across her face, and she felt the weight of the cathedral, the ruined ceremony, the mockery of her guests lingering in her mind. Her heart pounded not only with pain but with a spark of something dangerous, something that whispered of choices she had never considered before. "I can offer you protection," Lorenzo said, "not because you need saving, but because I recognize the fire in you. And fire deserves respect." Isabella's lips parted, but no words came. She had been so accustomed to betrayal, to being underestimated, that this recognition unsettled her in ways she hadn't expected. "Why would a man like you care for someone like me?" she asked finally, suspicion and intrigue warring in her tone. "Because some people," he said, stepping closer, "are rare, and when someone rare is wronged, it is unwise to leave them exposed." The sincerity in his voice struck her, even as she tried to deny it. Isabella had spent her life building walls, keeping others at a distance, but there was something about Lorenzo's presence that demanded attention, that whispered possibility. Before she could respond, her phone buzzed again. Another message from Alexander. "Isabella, I love you. I made a mistake. Please let me explain. I can't live without you." Her chest tightened. Anger flared, mingled with the ache of heartbreak. How could someone abandon their vows so easily, only to expect forgiveness moments later? How could someone so casually dismiss the depth of her trust and love? "Do not let him control your choices," Lorenzo said quietly, as if reading her thoughts. "Some pasts are dangerous and some betrayals are fatal. He does not deserve you, Isabella." Her eyes met his, and she felt a flicker of clarity. The path before her was uncertain, dangerous, and intoxicating. Alexander had left her at her weakest, but Lorenzo offered not just safety, but respect, recognition, and a challenge she had never known she craved. A slow, deliberate wind swept through the alley, carrying with it the scent of roses from the cathedral and something darker, something thrilling. Isabella's hands clenched, her mind racing with choices, possibilities, and the raw, aching fire of betrayal. "Perhaps," she said finally, her voice soft but steady, "perhaps I will consider your offer, but know this, I am not weak and I will not be anyone's pawn." Lorenzo inclined his head, a faint smile playing across his lips. "Good, I would not have it any other way. In this world, strength is all that matters, and you have strength enough to be remarkable." For the first time since Alexander had left her, Isabella felt the faintest stirrings of power within herself. She realized that heartbreak, humiliation, and betrayal were not the end. They were the beginning. And as the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the cobblestones, Isabella understood that her life had changed forever. A new world of danger, power, and dark allure had opened before her, and she would step into it with eyes wide open, ready to claim her own destiny. The cathedral bells tolled in the distance, marking not just the passage of time, but the end of one life and the beginning of another. And in the shadows, Lorenzo watched her, a silent promise in his gaze. The fire between them had been sparked and the storm of fate had only just begun. Cliffhanger. Isabella's phone buzzed once more. Another message from Alexander. "Please, Isabella, I can fix this. Just give me a chance." She looked up at Lorenzo, the wind catching her hair, the weight of choice heavy in her chest. And for the first time she realized, some betrayals could not be undone, but some paths, no matter how dark, could lead to unimaginable power and redemption. The city lights shimmered against the night sky, reflecting off the rain-slick streets like scattered stars. Isabella walked beside Lorenzo in silence, the weight of her thoughts heavier than the chill in the air. Every step seemed deliberate, echoing against the walls of the quiet alleyways that led them to his world, a world both terrifying and compelling. She had barely slept since the wedding. Alexander's betrayal had left a wound deeper than she had imagined. The humiliation, the shock, the sting of rejection, these memories haunted her like shadows that would not fade. And yet, walking beside Lorenzo, she felt a strange sense of safety, even in the darkness. His presence was commanding but calm, as if he carried the storm and the sun within him at the same time. "You are quiet tonight," Lorenzo observed, his voice smooth, carrying a subtle warmth. "Your thoughts are heavy." Isabella glanced at him, her eyes narrowing slightly. "It is difficult to be quiet when the world has proven itself so cruel. When someone you trusted abandons you at the moment of your greatest hope, it changes you." Lorenzo's gaze did not waver. "And yet here you are, walking beside me. That is not weakness, that is courage. You may not see it, but courage is rare in the world you are trying to navigate." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "Courage or stubbornness?" she asked, half smiling despite herself. "Sometimes they feel the same." "Perhaps," Lorenzo replied, "but stubbornness without vision is foolish. Courage without strategy is dangerous. You, Isabella, have the strength of both." She said nothing, but his words settled in her mind like seeds planted in fertile soil. They reached the doors of a grand building, its architecture both intimidating and magnificent. Black stone carved with sharp angles and flowing lines loomed above them, adorned with subtle golden accents that glimmered faintly in the dim light. Lorenzo led her inside without a word, and Isabella's eyes widened as she stepped into a world entirely unlike her own. The interior was luxurious yet dark, illuminated by soft amber lights that seemed to float in midair. Velvet drapes and polished marble floors gave the space an air of both elegance and danger. It was a world of power, and every detail whispered influence and command. "This is your home?" Isabella asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Lorenzo nodded. "My empire has many faces. This is one of them. Here decisions are made. Here power is both protected and tested." She walked slowly, absorbing every detail, the careful arrangement of artifacts, the subtle presence of armed guards who watched silently from the shadows. It was intimidating yet strangely captivating. Isabella realized that this world demanded respect, demanded strength, and she felt, for the first time, a flicker of curiosity rather than fear. "You have been wronged, Isabella," Lorenzo said, turning to face her. "But you also have a choice. You can remain powerless, a victim of circumstance, or you can take control of your destiny." She frowned. "Control in this world. You speak as if power can protect me from everything, but you cannot shield someone from betrayal or heartbreak." "You are correct," he said, his eyes darkening, almost solemn. "No one can shield you from every pain, but power gives you choice. It allows you to decide what matters and what does not, and it allows you to ensure that those who betray you cannot hurt you again." Isabella considered his words carefully. She had spent years believing in fairy tale love, in promises and vows. Alexander's actions had shattered those illusions completely. Perhaps it was time to accept that the world did not operate in gentle terms, and perhaps she needed someone who understood that. Lorenzo moved closer, his presence commanding yet respectful. "I propose something," he said softly. "Marry me. Not because I demand it, but because together we could be unstoppable. I do not ask for your love blindly. I ask for your trust, your strength, and your will." The words struck her with unexpected force. She opened her mouth to respond but found herself hesitating. Marriage to a mafia boss, someone whose world was filled with shadows, danger, and unspoken rules, was not what she had ever imagined. And yet, something in his voice, something in the calm certainty of his offer, made her heart pound with a mixture of fear and fascination. "Why me?" she asked finally, her voice trembling slightly. "Why would someone like you care for someone like me?" "Because you are not like the others," he said. "You are rare, strong, fierce, and you have been wronged in a way that most would not survive. I respect that. I do not ask for weakness, I ask for partnership. And partnership, Isabella, is power." Her mind raced. Alexander's image appeared unbidden, his smug arrogance and careless betrayal flashing in her memory. How could she compare him to this man, this enigma who stood before her, offering not promises of love but of strength and respect? Before she could answer, her phone buzzed again. Another message from Alexander appeared, desperate and pleading. "Isabella, please, I was wrong. I can make it right, just give me a chance." Her chest tightened. Anger flared, mingled with the ache of longing. How could someone so easily discard a life he promised to protect, only to demand forgiveness moments later? Her fingers trembled as she put the phone down, ignoring the message. Lorenzo's hand rested lightly on the small of her back, not controlling, not possessive, but grounding. "Do not let the past control you," he said quietly. "Some people are shadows, Isabella. They drift through your life, leaving pain behind. You deserve more than shadows. You deserve power and recognition of your worth." The sincerity in his voice unsettled her. She had been raised to value love and security above all else, yet here was a man who offered respect, partnership, and a challenge that called to the deepest parts of her soul. "Power," she whispered, almost to herself. "And recognition." "Yes," he said, stepping back, allowing her space. "And freedom to choose. You can remain trapped in a world that betrayed you, or you can step into mine and learn to command your life. The choice is yours, Isabella, but know this, some paths once taken cannot be undone." She swallowed hard, the weight of his words pressing on her. The grandeur of his empire, the intensity of his gaze, the undeniable tension between them. It all stirred something unfamiliar, a dangerous curiosity she could not ignore. I need time," she said finally, her voice soft but firm. This is not a decision I can make lightly." "Take all the time you need," Lorenzo replied calmly, though his eyes held a faint glimmer of anticipation. "But do not delay for too long. Life moves quickly in my world, and opportunities, like fire, cannot always be contained." Isabella nodded, though inside she felt a storm brewing. She could not ignore the allure of this man, this world, this power. Yet she could not forget the betrayal that had wounded her so deeply. Her heart ached, torn between fear, anger, and the strange, undeniable pull she felt toward Lorenzo. The night deepened, and Lorenzo escorted her to the door, his presence protective yet non-intrusive. "Think carefully, Isabella," he said. "The choice you make now will shape your life forever." She watched him fade into the shadows, leaving her standing in the rain-soaked street, feeling both smaller and stronger than she had ever felt before. The city seemed different now, darker, more dangerous, but alive with possibilities she had never imagined. Her phone buzzed again. Another message from Alexander. "I can't live without you. Please, Isabella, come back to me." She stared at the screen, her fingers trembling. Anger and betrayal surged through her, but beneath it, a spark of something new, a sense of agency, of power, of choice, began to grow. Alexander had abandoned her, but she would not let him dictate the rest of her life. Not anymore. Isabella took a deep breath, the cold night air filling her lungs. She looked up at the city lights, shimmering like distant stars, and for the first time she felt the stirrings of resolve. She would decide her path. She would claim her strength. And she would do so on her own terms, whether Alexander understood it or not. The fire between her and Lorenzo had been kindled, a quiet promise in the shadows, and she knew that the journey ahead would be filled with challenges, choices, and dangers unlike anything she had ever faced. But for the first time, she felt ready. The night held its breath, waiting for her next move. Cliffhanger. As Isabella turned to leave, a black car slowed near the curb. Alexander stepped out, his expression desperate, eyes pleading. "Isabella, please, I can fix this. I need you." "Don't do this," he said, reaching toward her. Isabella looked past him toward the darkness where Lorenzo had disappeared. And in that moment, she realized that some betrayals could not be undone. But some paths, no matter how dark, could lead to unimaginable power, freedom, and perhaps a new kind of love. Isabella woke to the soft light filtering through tall, dark curtains. For the first time since the betrayal, she felt a strange clarity in her mind. The memory of Alexander's abandonment still burned in her chest, but alongside it was the spark of something new, a dangerous, thrilling possibility. She was no longer just a victim of love. She was someone with choices, someone with power waiting to be claimed. Her steps were deliberate as she moved through Lorenzo's residence. The mansion, silent at this early hour, reflected a life built on control, strategy, and shadows. Isabella had begun to understand that this world was not for the faint of heart. Every object, every piece of art, even the guards moving silently through the halls, carried purpose. She felt both out of place and drawn to the intensity of it all. Lorenzo entered without knocking, as he often did, his presence filling the room even before he spoke. "Good morning," he said, his voice calm yet commanding. "Sleep well." "Fitfully," Isabella admitted, rubbing her temples. "I keep thinking about Alexander, about everything." Lorenzo's eyes softened slightly, though his demeanor remained firm. "Alexander is a shadow," he said, "and shadows cannot guide your life. You must learn to navigate the light and the darkness yourself." She met his gaze, searching for the challenge hidden in his words. "And what about you?" she asked. "Why are you in my life? Why did you step in?" "Because I saw something in you," he replied. "Strength and fire. People like you do not belong in a world that discards them easily. You have potential, Isabella, and I do not tolerate waste." Her lips parted slightly, both offended and intrigued. There was no flattery in his words, only honesty, and a recognition of her worth she had never experienced before. Alexander had treated her as replaceable. Lorenzo, in contrast, treated her as formidable. "You are dangerous," she said finally, half smiling. "Not in a way that frightens me, but in a way that makes me think I could follow you into fire." Lorenzo's gaze darkened with a faint flicker of admiration. "Fire is necessary," he said, "but only if you learn to control it, not let it consume you." Isabella understood, even as her chest tightened. This world, his world, demanded more than obedience. It demanded mastery, strategy, and courage, and she felt an irresistible pull to prove herself worthy. The days that followed were a whirlwind. Isabella observed Lorenzo's operations closely, learning the intricacies of his empire, the delicate balance between influence and intimidation, loyalty and fear. She saw how he negotiated with rivals, commanded respect, and ensured that every decision carried weight. It was not a world of glamour, but of calculated danger. And in it, Isabella began to grow, not as a pawn, but as a partner, learning to wield power with precision. She realized that strength was not just physical, but the courage to face fear, betrayal, and responsibility. Alexander, meanwhile, remained a persistent shadow in her mind. He reached out often, sending messages filled with regret and pleas for another chance. But Isabella had begun to see him clearly. His charm was shallow, his promises empty, and his actions had revealed the limits of his character. One evening, during a formal gala hosted by Lorenzo to negotiate with allied factions, Alexander made a bold move. Isabella arrived, draped in elegance that mirrored her growing confidence. She had learned to present herself with poise, a subtle but undeniable command of attention. Alexander appeared unannounced, weaving through the crowd until he confronted her. "Isabella," he said, voice low but urgent, "we can fix this. I made a mistake, I need you back." The room seemed to fade around her. For a moment, the hurt of betrayal, the echo of shattered vows, surged to the surface. But Isabella's gaze shifted to the shadows near the stage, where Lorenzo observed silently, his expression unreadable but intense. "I trusted you," she said softly, her voice steady despite the tremor of emotion beneath it. "And you abandoned me." "Do you understand what that means?" Alexander faltered, his confidence cracking. I was scared. I didn't know what to do, but I love you." "Love," she interrupted, her voice rising slightly. Love is not abandoning someone at the altar, Alexander. Love is standing through the storm. You failed me. He reached for her hand, desperate. Please, Isabella, just hear me. We can fix this. We can be happy. She pulled her hand back, feeling a surge of strength she had not known she possessed. No, Alexander, we cannot. You do not deserve the woman I am becoming, and you will not have the power to hurt me again. Lorenzo stepped forward, silent but imposing. His mere presence shifted the energy in the room, the kind of authority that made even powerful men pause. She speaks the truth, Alexander, he said calmly. Some mistakes cannot be undone, and some betrayals cannot be forgiven without consequence. The clarity in Lorenzo's voice, the steady assurance, resonated within Isabella. She realized that Alexander's pleas were empty shadows compared to the tangible respect and understanding she found in Lorenzo. And in that moment, her resolve solidified. The gala continued, but Isabella's focus shifted. She observed the political maneuvers, the subtle exchanges, the careful balance of power that defined Lorenzo's world. She learned quickly, speaking only when necessary, her words measured but impactful. She was no longer merely a spectator, she was a participant shaping events subtly but effectively. Lorenzo noticed, a faint smile touching his lips. You adapt quickly, he whispered during a quiet moment. That is rare, many falter, even those born into power. Isabella's cheeks warmed slightly. I have no choice, she said softly. I cannot let anyone control my life again. Not Alexander, not anyone. Good, he replied, eyes meeting hers with an intensity that sent a shiver through her. And know this, strength alone is not enough. Trust and understanding are as vital as courage. You have both, Isabella, though you may not see it yet. She nodded, a quiet determination settling in her chest. She would not allow fear, heartbreak, or betrayal to define her. She would rise, not merely as a survivor, but as a force to be reckoned with. Days later, an urgent situation tested her resolve. A rival faction had threatened Lorenzo's operations, and Isabella was unexpectedly drawn into the conflict. Using the knowledge she had gained, she acted decisively, diffusing tensions and protecting key allies. Her courage and quick thinking earned the admiration of those who had once doubted her, and even Lorenzo allowed a faint, approving smile to grace his lips. You see, he said later, once the danger had passed, you are stronger than you know. You do not need anyone to define your worth. You have it yourself. Isabella's chest swelled with a mixture of pride and relief. She had begun to understand that power, respect, and love could coexist, but only if one was willing to fight for them. That night, she returned to her room, exhausted but alive with a new awareness. Alexander's messages had continued, each one desperate and pleading, but they no longer held the same power over her. She had confronted him in her mind, examined his character, and decided that her heart would not be swayed by hollow apologies. Instead, she thought of Lorenzo, not as a savior but as a partner, a man whose world she could navigate with intelligence, courage, and determination. The connection between them was subtle, charged with unspoken understanding, mutual respect, and a growing tension that neither dared name yet. The fire between them was no longer just attraction. It was respect, trust, and the kind of bond forged in shared danger and understanding. And Isabella knew that stepping fully into this world meant embracing all its shadows and all its light. The following evening, Lorenzo approached her with a proposition. You have proven yourself, he said, not just tonight but in every choice you have made since arriving in this world. You are capable, fierce, and wise, and now I offer you something more. Isabella tilted her head, curiosity and caution mixing in her gaze. What is that? I ask you to marry me, he said calmly, almost poetically. Not out of necessity, but because I recognize in you an equal. Together we could command more than just power, we could command our destinies. Her breath caught. She had expected danger, intrigue, even loyalty, But this proposal carried weight beyond politics. It was recognition, trust, and challenge wrapped into one. She began, but hesitated. The memories of betrayal, the lingering shadow of Alexander's deceit, and the fear of stepping fully into a dangerous world all collided in her mind. Lorenzo's gaze softened, his hand brushing lightly against hers. Take your time. But remember, opportunities such as this are fleeting. Strength without choice is wasted. Choose wisely, Isabella, and claim the life you deserve. She nodded, feeling both fear and exhilaration. This was her chance to redefine herself, to step into power, and to embrace a bond that was equal parts challenge and salvation. And somewhere in the shadows, Alexander watched from afar, realizing too late that Isabella's heart was no longer his to claim. Cliffhanger. Isabella's eyes followed Lorenzo as he disappeared into the night, leaving her with a choice that would define not only her heart, but the world she was about to command. Could she trust herself enough to embrace both power and love, or would the shadows of the past still haunt her path? The city was alive with a restless energy as Isabella walked through the streets, her mind a storm of thoughts. Rain had begun to fall, soft at first, then heavier, washing the world in silver reflections. Her gown clung lightly to her frame, and the chill of the evening did nothing to cool the fire inside her. Tonight, the decision she had postponed would be made. She could no longer linger in uncertainty. Alexander had sent her a message that morning, insistent and desperate. Isabella, I can fix this. Come back to me. Please don't throw away what we had. She had read it once, then deleted it. Her heart had fluttered with the old ache of longing, but her mind was sharper now. She had seen the man he truly was, not the image he wanted her to believe, but the man who had abandoned her at her most vulnerable. And then there was Lorenzo, calm, dangerous, and yet unwavering in his respect for her strength. He had offered her more than protection. He had offered recognition, partnership, and a challenge that stirred something deep in her soul. She realized now that the path she had feared walking alone could be one of power and fulfillment if she chose wisely. The rain fell harder as she reached Lorenzo's mansion, its towering black walls glinting in the storm's reflection. Guards moved silently, acknowledging her with subtle nods. This was no longer a foreign world. It had become a place where she belonged if she dared claim it. Inside, Lorenzo waited in his study, his figure partially shadowed by the dim light of candles and the glow of the city beyond. He did not speak immediately, allowing the storm outside to set the rhythm of their silence. Isabella stepped forward, her boots making soft echoes on the marble floor. You've made your choice, Lorenzo said finally, his voice low and steady. I can see it in your eyes. Isabella paused, searching for doubt, searching for fear, but all she found was clarity and resolve. I have, she admitted softly, but it is not a choice I make lightly. Not for power, not for safety, but for the man who sees me, not as fragile or replaceable, but as whole. Lorenzo's eyes darkened, a faint smile touching his lips. Then we shall face the world together. The moment was shattered by the sound of hurried footsteps. Alexander appeared in the doorway, drenched from the rain, desperation etched across his face. Isabella, please, I've realized my mistake. I can't live without you. Her chest tightened, a familiar ache rising, but she stood taller than before. Alexander, she said, her voice steady, you had your chance. You left me at the altar. You abandoned the woman you promised to protect. There is nothing you can say now that will undo that. His face twisted with disbelief and pleading. But I love you. You do not love me, she interrupted sharply. Love does not abandon. Love does not hide behind excuses. You wanted convenience, not devotion. And I deserve more than that. Alexander's eyes filled with something that might have been regret, but Isabella did not allow herself to waver. She had chosen strength, clarity, and a man who respected her power. Lorenzo stepped forward, his presence calm but unyielding. It is done, Alexander. You cannot command her heart nor her destiny. This is a lesson in consequence. Some opportunities once lost cannot return. Alexander's shoulders slumped, his last hope fading. With one final, anguished look, he turned and walked away, leaving Isabella and Lorenzo in the quiet storm of the mansion. Isabella exhaled slowly, feeling the tension drain from her body. She looked at Lorenzo, a mixture of relief and anticipation flooding her chest. "It is over," she whispered. "For now," he said, though his eyes hinted at the challenges they would face together. "But the world does not yield easily. Power and love must be nurtured, protected, and sometimes fought for." Isabella nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settle upon her shoulders, not as a burden but as a promise. She had survived betrayal, navigated a dangerous world, and discovered the depth of her own courage. Now, she was ready to claim everything she had earned. Over the following weeks, Isabella fully immersed herself in Lorenzo's world. She learned not only about strategy and power, but also about loyalty, trust, and subtle influence. She met with allies, negotiated delicate situations, and navigated rival factions with a confidence that surprised even herself. Through it all, Lorenzo remained by her side, not as a master but as a partner. They shared moments of quiet understanding, rare laughter, and subtle tension that hinted at something deeper than trust. Their bond was built on respect, challenge, and the acknowledgement of each other's strength. One evening, as the rain drummed softly against the mansion's windows, Lorenzo led Isabella to the balcony overlooking the city. Lights shimmered below like scattered stars. He took her hand gently, turning her to face him. "You have changed," he said quietly, his gaze intense. "Not because I shaped you, but because you chose to embrace yourself. You are remarkable, Isabella." She smiled faintly, feeling warmth she had not known in years. "I have learned much," she admitted, "about power, about betrayal, about love. And I have learned that love is not about safety alone. It is about respect, partnership, and courage." He nodded, his eyes dark with emotion. "Then you understand why I asked you to join me, not as someone to protect, but as someone equal. Together we are not just strong, we are unstoppable." The words settled in her heart. For the first time, Isabella felt that she was exactly where she was meant to be. The past, with its betrayal and heartbreak, had forged her, but it did not define her. She was no longer the abandoned bride. She was a queen in her own right. The storm outside began to ease, leaving a quiet stillness in its wake. Isabella and Lorenzo remained on the balcony, hands intertwined, watching as the city below slowly awakened under the glow of streetlights and neon reflections. "You have chosen wisely," Lorenzo said softly, his thumb brushing over her hand. "The world may still challenge us, but together we are stronger than any obstacle." Isabella's gaze met his, filled with a mixture of love, respect, and quiet determination. "And I am ready," she said, "ready to face whatever comes as long as we face it together." For a long moment they stood in silence, the weight of the past, the present, and the possibilities of the future settling over them. The fire between them was no longer uncertain. It was a steady, glowing force, built on trust, respect, and shared strength. Days later, the empire faced its first major test under Isabella's growing influence. A rival faction had attempted a covert attack, hoping to exploit what they assumed was vulnerability in Lorenzo's world. Isabella acted decisively, coordinating defenses, advising strategy, and ensuring the safety of key allies. Her decisions were sharp, her instincts precise. Lorenzo observed her, pride flickering in his gaze. "You have grown beyond expectation," he murmured. "Not only as a partner in this world, but as a leader." Isabella's heart swelled. She realized that power, love, and respect could coexist, but only when earned and nurtured. She was no longer a pawn of circumstance or the shadow of betrayal. She was a queen, ready to rule her own destiny. Later that night, in the quiet of the mansion, Isabella and Lorenzo shared a rare moment of peace. The city slept below them, unaware of the challenges faced and the victories earned. They did not speak much, allowing the silence to speak volumes. Hands clasped, eyes locked, they shared a bond that transcended fear, danger, and even heartbreak. "You have changed my life," Lorenzo said finally, his voice low and certain. "Not just with your presence, but with your strength. I am honored to walk beside you." "And I am honored to walk beside you," Isabella replied, her voice steady, her gaze unwavering. "You have shown me that love is not weakness, but a partnership of equals. That is what I choose every day." The night stretched on, filled with quiet understanding and unspoken promises. The storm of the past had passed, leaving clarity and purpose in its wake. Isabella had embraced her power, conquered her heartbreak, and discovered a love built on respect, courage, and equality. Weeks later, as Isabella and Lorenzo stood together overlooking the city, a new figure appeared on the horizon, a hint of potential danger, a shadow yet to be revealed. Isabella glanced at Lorenzo, a faint smile touching her lips. "Whatever comes," she said softly, "we face it together." Lorenzo's hand found hers, firm and unwavering. "Always," he replied. And as the city lights shimmered beneath them, Isabella realized that the fire within her, the power she had claimed, and the love she had chosen were unstoppable. She was no longer a victim of betrayal. She was a queen of her own destiny, with a partner who recognized her strength, shared her burdens, and stood beside her through every shadow and storm. The future was uncertain, yes, but for the first time Isabella welcomed it with open arms, knowing that together they could face anything. Cliffhanger resolution. The past had tried to pull her down. Alexander had tried to reclaim her. But Isabella had chosen power, love, and respect. The shadows of the world might still move against them, but together, Isabella and Lorenzo would face every challenge, their bond unbreakable, their fire eternal.